I think for most of my life, I've had some sort of insecurity or other, right from when I was a kid. And most of the time, I never wanted people to know about this stuff. I never wanted people to know that I was feeling insecure or that I was feeling inferior or lesser than someone, because I was always afraid of people either making fun of me when I was a kid, or people thinking less of me, or people not respecting me. I think the lack of respect, or the perception of a lack of respect, was something that really scared me, because when I was a kid, there were a lot of instances where other kids definitely didn't respect me and called me names, and there was racism, all kinds of problems. And so that's something that really, really stuck with me. This need to be respected by other people, this sort of self-consciousness, this concern with what other people think of me. And so because of that, I'd often hide my insecurities. I'd hide my perceived weaknesses. And I wanted people to feel that I was just like them. A good example of this would be, for example, the fact that I didn't lose my virginity until into my 20s. So when I was at college as an 18-year-old, and all my friends were getting laid and sleeping around and stuff, I just sort of, whenever conversations came up around sex or positions and things like that, I just sort of spoke as if I was someone who had also experienced it. But I hadn't, and I didn't until my 20s. But I didn't want people to know at the time, because I thought it was really embarrassing, the fact that I hadn't had sex yet, because it seemed like such a common thing for everyone. And so 4 years in college, I don't think any of my friends knew about that. When I look back now, I doubt people would have cared that much, to be honest. But at the time, I thought it was a point of deep shame for myself to have not had that experience. So I didn't tell anyone about it. And that's a pretty good example of how I would hide the truth from people in order to keep up appearances. And there are other things in my life similar to that. Yeah. There are other things in my life similar to that where I didn't tell people the truth. And at this point, I've come to realize that it's just hard to keep up appearances. It's just hard to maintain this facade of something you're not. Even if you're successful at it, after a while, there's something tiring about your output and what you say and what you present to people not being aligned with the reality of who you are. And it really hits you when things go wrong, or when your life forces you into a point of weakness or difficulty, and you have to seek help from other people. And then you're forced to admit where you're failing. You're forced to admit where things aren't that perfect. For example, if you go to therapy, you have to tell your therapist problems. Well, hopefully you will. I went to therapy for about 8 months several years ago, and I told my therapist a lot of things, but to be honest, I didn't open up with everything. And it made me realize that even if you go to therapy, even if you're paying for someone to listen to you without judgment, it's really hard to open up and tell them every single thing. So after a while, though, it just becomes difficult to maintain that. And I find now that it's just, as part of my growth, as part of becoming more confident in myself and becoming more truthful to myself, because being truthful to yourself is, in a way, more important than being truthful to the world. And actually, if you're truthful to yourself, it's much easier to be truthful to the world. I mean, why do you have to hide something from other people in the first place? Because in a way, you don't want to face that truth yourself. You don't want to face the consequences of that. So in being truthful to myself, I've come to realize that it's better if I can just tell people these things that I don't want them to know about. Like the fact that I didn't lose my virginity until I was in my 20s, right? I mean, now I can just tell everyone about this without fear of what they're going to think of me. It took a while to reach this point, because when I first told another person, I was so scared about what they were going to think of me. It took a while, but now I'm at this point where I can talk about that openly. And I want to arrive at that similar point with every other issue in my life. And, in conjunction with that, if there's something I feel about someone, if there's something that I'm feeling or I'm perceiving to do with a person, I want to be able to tell that person whatever that is as soon as possible, instead of holding it in out of fear of what they might think of me, or because I don't think it's the right time. I mean, at the end of the day, one of the philosophies I sort of revisit, or I sort of keep coming back to in my mind, is how, because life is short, you might as well just say the things you want to say and do the things you want to do. At the end of the day, even if you make mistakes, even if you are going to regret it later, well, actually, maybe you'd regret it even more by not taking the chance. What happens if you're going to die one day, you know you're dying? Are you going to look back and think, oh, I'm so glad I didn't take that chance at that time, even though I wasn't sure about taking that chance? No, I don't think you'd feel that way. So one of my maxims that I now have is that, which is, if I'm not sure if I should say something, and it's not something where I'm going to hurt someone or do something illegal, it's just something that I'll say to someone which might make them feel a little bit uncomfortable, but it's actually the truth of what I feel. If I'm not sure about whether to make that statement, on balance, I should make the statement. And I'm training myself to be more like that and be more open. And I find that to be just so much more liberating than trying to pretend to be something other than that. And I think a lot of us just pretend. We're just afraid to express ourselves as people. We're afraid of judgment from the world. Part of it's due to how society's set up. There's a fear of failure because society doesn't reward failure. It condemns it in a way. So people don't want to show that they failed. People don't want to appear like failures. But of course, life doesn't always work out like that. And sometimes you do, quote unquote, fail. And then you're forced to seek help. And I think, in a way, it's good that in the modern world, it's easier, especially for men, to be able to talk about their feelings, talk about their problems, and to not be judged harshly for doing that, because at the end of the day, we're all human, right? And we all need to deal with problems at some point or another. So I think that's a good thing. And I just think that building on that, we should all practice this a lot more. And I think if more of us were to speak our mind a bit more honestly, coming from a calm space, then I think the world would be a much better place, and we'd all be communicating with each other a lot more. Now, I can't expect the world to do that, so at least for my life, for me as a person, I'm going to try and do this and keep communicating openly with people and keep just training myself in that discipline of doing that until it becomes second nature.